And now we move on to arborization and synaptogenesis. So it's even happening in utero, but now the kid's born, and you start out with a certain number of synapses and neurons, and then we're adding them. And that's growing, and the kid's taking off. There are a whole lot of things being added in terms of arborization and synaptogenesis. What's the key to what we're doing? We want firing to happen in a regular, systematic, predictable kind of way. If things happen in a regular, systematic, predictable kind of way, then you're going to get a brain that wires up and keeps the connections that are running well, given that it had good genetic start. All right. And so that's what we want. When we're talking to parents, we're trying to help them see you got to be consistent, you got to follow through, you got to show affection, you got to do it in ways that respect your kid, and try to help them get that sense of things, because that's going to make a good set of connections in that brain. When I was working with one sexually abused person, and her mom had been allied with the dad in denying sexual abuse in my client forever. Dad subsequently died. The client came to terms with, I'm sure I was sexually abused. Mom and dad said it didn't happen, but I'm sure it happened. And so she had gotten some peace and was moving forward. Dad died. Several years later, mom is getting close to dying, and she has a heart-to-heart with her daughter and says, I know it happened. And then she says, even one time I remember when you were in your crib and Dad came into the crib, you pushed away to the other side of the crib, okay? The implication being, oh my God, this stuff was going on down between 0 and 1. How sad and how unfortunate. When my client heard that, she started to, after lots of years of work, but she started to then decompensate again and fall apart. Where is that coming from? I'll never know for sure, but one of the senses I have is, what is the memory, the implicit memory of a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old? What kind of memory does she have of that experience? It will not be a memory of her father's face, okay? It will be a memory of feeling, and that's what it'll be. And a feeling and an experience of being disorganized, okay? Because that early memory, that's what memory is going to be about for that person. We worked on it. We talked about that may be what was happening to her. It gave her, hippocampal explicit kind of memory picture, insightful. Okay, maybe that is what's going on. So it doesn't mean I'm crazy and I'm going to lose it all again like I had before. And she started to move on, and things fell back into place. And I will never know that is what happened, when she started experiencing that triggered that for her. But it certainly was something that crossed my mind. Again, the message for parents is, can you have rhythmic kind of things? The baby cries. You check and see if the baby's wet. You check and see if the baby's hungry. You check these things. You take care of the baby. You help the baby feel good again. Maybe you rock the baby for a little while. And the baby learns this experience, has this set of experiences of there's distress, there's expression of distress, there's a response from the world around you, and things get better. And it happens over and over again. And if the dad can get involved in that and the mom's involved in that, then you have a kid that can be well connected. When the story that I would have when I was in Houston, I worked in Kingwood. Kingwood's, 25 to 30 miles from downtown Houston. So the dad goes down to, into Houston to work. And so you have this sort of attitude of, when my kid's 9 years old or 8 years old and he can start playing baseball, I'll come out and hang out with him. But otherwise, I'm going to make money because this is a good time to do it because nothing really matters to the kid right now. Okay. Well, then you have these years and years of early development when there's so little connection, and then the dad's so frustrated that the kid doesn't care about the dad's reaction when he's 15 and his dad's upset with him for taking the car. Those kind of connections build on the early emotional bonds and things that we can have. Now, I'm sort of nefarious, I don't know. So I have my son, my oldest son. My oldest son, when he was born, his wrists were about this big around and his knees were this big around, and I was just going, oh my God, this is going to be bad news. This guy's going to be in charge pretty fast. So we would be playing, and it would be fun, and we would be wrestling, and then I would sort of win, and then I would just lay there a little heavy. And I was thinking, you know what? He's going to remember me being on top of him, laying here winning, and he's not going to want to give me any grief. I made it. I made it here. He punched one hole in the wall before he got out of the house. But other than that, I ended up safe. And so who knows if that made any difference. But I did have that thought that I want this guy to feel like I'm in charge. I never had that thought about my other guys, but that one I did. But again, my processing even then was early emotional experiences are implicit memories of experiences that happen. And I have this fantasy that he had this experience when he was, 290 pounds and this monster guy. And he said, yeah, but I just can't hurt Dad because that's pretty scary. I don't know. So who knows? And then, so we've got the brain in early development, and then we're going to move on to, to getting a more organized brain. So some of the implications are consistent stimulation generates good connections, and so we want that to be happening, and we want to combine things. Again, somebody said something about trying to convince the parents of trying to do the more straightforward, implicit kind of interventions. You do it over and over again rather than counting on the insight of the kid. So I want things to happen over and over again. If I'm going to pick up the toys for my 1 or 2 year old, I don't say, you need to pick up your toys or you're going to timeout. I go, here, I'm picking up the toys, we're putting them here. You can come pick them up with me. If the kid's pre-verbal, and I'm saying I'm picking up the toys and I'm putting them in the box and I'm pairing the vision of the activity with the words of the activity, then I'm starting to make consistent things happen so that actually language will happen with this kid faster. And it will be meaningful faster. And so I'm using those ideas of implicit development, repeated connections, not insight. I'm not trying to help this kid particularly develop insight into the value of picking up toys. I'm trying to help them have a constant repetition of, when you pick up toys, Dad's happy. When you pick up toys, Mom's happy. When you pick up toys, you get more free time because we got them out of the way faster. We have that set of experiences. I will talk about that. I will point it out, so that they will learn that the fastest that they can learn. But I'm counting on my repetitions being what happens. Okay, so disorganized experiences yield a disorganized brain. Sorry. Like one example was a mom came in, pretty straightforward. They've got a kid who's pretty out of control compared to their other kids. After that kid, when he was born, she got very depressed, like on the couch still for days and days at a time, very depressed. All right. This kid has so very little connection with, am I making anybody feel bad? It's like it comes to his mind, he wants to do it, he goes and does it. All right. So we're ended up working with that kid on, we've got to have specific consequences, we've got to have, we praise and we say good job, but that's not going to work for him like a well-attached kid, okay? Because good job and mom smiling is not going to be registering, because during that early attachment period, that is not what was happening. He was not building those kind of connections. And so we just have to end up working with that kid in a different kind of way, because he had a brain that was disorganized in certain kinds of ways. The executive that we talked about way at the beginning, and the disorganization they started to feel when they began to feel lost when the economy crashed. That kind of disorganization is laying in there, left over from those early experiences. We talked about, you talk about experiences are processed at the current level. The example I would have is the kid is in the kitchen. Dad comes in. What's been happening is Dad and Mom have been fighting for the past 6 months. Dad is enraged with Mom. He comes into the kitchen. The kid says, "Can I have some water?" The dad says, "Shut up," sweeps his hand across the counter, and the salt shaker slams into the face of the stove, and the thing shatters. All right, and the kid's there going, "Oh my God!" And then Dad leaves and doesn't come back. He never moves back into the house. So you have this little 4-year-old who grows up with the idea that I drove Dad off, okay, and I asked for something and it made my whole family fall apart. Right? And so that early set of experiences are experienced at the level that kid could get. We can go back there when he's 30, and we can look back over those things, and he will feel that same sort of, I can't ask for things and I shouldn't do that, but we can start to have some insight into that. And then, in fact, he may be able to even have an image in his head of dad walking in, and he actually can remember mom yelling, because that's part of that recorded memory, because guess what? How much emotion was helping that memory get recorded? It was intense. And he can, this 30-year-old can review the memory that this 4-year-old has, and then he can see, but wait, I can remember seeing that. And that can have a powerful impact on, oh yeah, I can see that. And it's sort of, the image back then actually has pieces that match a different point of view, and the person can start to process them in a different kind of way. Another kind of thing with being experienced at the current level is if my 2-year-old starts to do drawing, or my 3-year-old starts to do letters or something, and my response is, oh yeah, but it's not quite an M, Meredith. Keep working at it. Or I say, oh wow, you got a hump. That's pretty cool. Look at that hump. Okay, and then a year later we've got a couple of humps, and it really is an M. Those kinds of experiences, if we can match our praise and match what we label for our kids, then our kids can have a positive bond and experience about what happens to them, as opposed to people having expectations that are beyond them. Not sure where I've got it in here, but there's one of the things about this early kind of experiences is sort of the whole idea of toilet training. Okay, so Freud says, you have bad toilet training, and so then you have psychosexual disorders or whatever. But I think Freud overstated it in some ways. But when you think of a 2-year-old and you think of toilet training and you think of what happens, I want to be up with all the other moms in Alamo Heights, isn't it? Okay, so I know the ones in Houston, but so I'm going to start my kid at 20 months to make sure they beat the 24-month thing, and he's going to be toilet trained. Well, guess what? Neurologically, he's not ready to be toilet trained. Okay, and so now I sit him there, he can't do it, I'm frustrated because I'm not going to look good in front of everybody else. So we go through this fight, and then a year later, he's still not toilet trained. The doctor says he has all the neurological stuff, he has all the physical capabilities. What happened? So we started him too early, we fought with him about it, so when he finally had the capacity to do it, fighting and resisting, which is what can kids do at age 2 to have an identity, say no. Now no has been integrated into, when parents tell me to do stuff, it's not going to work, I'm going to say no, it relieves me because that's the way I can fight and not do. So Freud was right. Oppositionality, defiance, all that stuff can start at that age. It's not toilet, it's the fact that it becomes part of an overall picture of how things unfold. Now you have to take all that with a grain of salt. I'm a dad who had a 3.5-year-old who could put on his own diaper. What do you do with that? But he's fine. He has no problems. He's getting ready to go to college. He filled out all his college applications by himself. I never even got to see him. But it's if we have parents who are pushing, want to make stuff happen, and they're putting too much onto their kids. They're trying to push them forward too far. Even with this idea, implicit memory, give them as many experiences as you can. But if I give them so many experiences that they're worn out, worn down, overwhelmed, then overwhelmed gets built into their implicit memory of what life is like. All right. One of the problems for learning with parents is you can't see it happen. How many times does it take before the kid learns to pick up his toys? Tons. What takes a 8-year-old 3 trials to learn takes a 3-year-old 100 trials to learn. And so parents can't see the effects of what they're doing, and so they don't end up being consistent because they don't follow through that well. Connections are stronger with higher affect, so when real emotional experiences happen. And early learning is procedural, slowly over and over again. You got to be consistent. You got to do it over and over again, or the kid's not going to get the handle on it. This is just a graphic to give you that sense of that development of this is 0. This graphic shows activity in the different areas of the brain. Each of those different types of dots is activity in an area of the brain. So this is number and activity of neurons and synapses. And now by the time you're 6 to 10, look over here, lots more neurons, lots more connections, lots more glucose being used. And then what happens is, so that's the arborization and synaptogenesis that's been working up to here. And now we hit 10, and now we go from 10 to 12 to 14 to 16 to 18, and then adult. And we're just going downhill. So it's a long time ago that you had the most neurons you're ever going to have. Right? And you got to live with it. Now, actually, it's incredibly efficient. What happens is you get so many that there's so much activity, it's very hard to organize it and figure stuff out. And that's how the competition starts to happen, so that the neurons start to die and synapses start to get left behind. And then we start to move down this track. And so the brain is actually becoming more efficient, and it can carry out tasks better, and then that works better. And so that's pruning. The parenting activities that work for arborization and synaptogenesis, you can get more sophisticated, but the rules are the same. Repetition, 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 consistency, consistency, consistency. That helps you keep the ones that are good. During the first 10 years, it's helping you build the ones that are good, and if you keep on doing it, it will help the kid keep the ones that are good if they have a consistent, predictable set of experiences in life.